welcome to Fighting Over the VCR. My name is Nancy.
And I'm Matthew.
And we are brother and sister, and we like to talk about movies that we watched growing up together.
Some of which that we both really like, and some of which hopefully one of us likes.
Well, you know, as movies age, maybe your opinion changes a little bit.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
There's some movies that maybe your opinion changes and you like it in a different way.
Yes.
Which I would say definitely goes for one of these movies for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then in other ways, you know, sometimes you don't like it anymore. You kind of think different ways about it. Sometimes you like it for the same reasons.
Yeah. Later in the show, I'll be talking about a phenomenal movie called Stand By Me.
And I'm going to start by talking about the world famous, super fun movie, if you are 12 years old, Goonies. I just want to say that this is, you know, we try and pair movies for different reasons. Sometimes it's based on actors, sometimes it's based on general theme, sometimes it's based on just what we feel like talking about. But
sometimes it's based if we saw them at the same time.
That too.
Like in the same time frame.
Yeah. These two movies actually have a couple things in common that we totally intentionally put them together for these reasons.
Or not.
Or not, but mostly because of this. But both these movies are about kids about the same age going through kind of life-changing events and going on an adventure. Mm-hmm. And
they're about they're the same age. They're about 12.
They're about 12 years old, roughly. And they're a group of friends who there's some sort of event that's going on, whether it's in Stand By Me, it's the end of summer and they're getting ready to go into like middle school and be kind of separated a little bit because school is different in middle school. And in Goonies, which is kind of the underlying theme of the whole movie, is it starts out where the main family that we're following, the Walshes, and the main character that were played by Sean Astin in his first movie role ever, plays Mikey Walsh, and his brother Brandon and their family are part of a group of families who, you know, all of Mikey's friends, the Goonies, they all live in an area of Astoria, Oregon called the Goondocks, which is how they get their name. And it's kind of I guess it's a less affluent area that is about to get purchased by a country club to build a golf course. So they're all being forced to move.
They're victims of eminent domain.
Well, and they're buying they're all kind of depressed because it's, you know, by the next day they could all be losing their homes. They all have to move away. One of the kids, Data, his family's moving to Detroit, and you know, a lot of them just kind of don't even know where they're going. Their parents just have to figure it out. And Mikey Walsh and his brother Brandon Walsh, their dad is kind of the head of the group of all of them, trying to figure out how they can afford to keep the land so they can all continue living there and continue being the Goonies and be friends.
They're leading the resistance.
Yes. This movie came out in 1985, and it's produced by world famous, and you know, he really kind of made a lot of movies for our generation. Watch Steven Spielberg, and
he borrowed from maybe one of his other movies to help make this movie. Maybe Raiders of the Lost Ark.
It has a very kind of Indiana Jones feel.
Yeah,
but also
same actor too, right? Is Data the same actor that's
Data? The actor that plays an actor plays Short Round in Temple of Doom.
Okay.
I think that came out just before this movie or around the same time.
Okay.
It's directed by Richard Donner, who directed a ton of movies or had some sort of influence on a ton of movies from the 80s. If I'm just going to list a few, he is involved in Superman, the original Superman with Christopher Reeve, and Superman 2, which you don't really know because he was so unhappy with it, he didn't want his name on it. A great movie called Lady Hawk, which has Matthew Broderick. It's kind of a medieval, kind of magical fantasy movie. Lethal Weapon, working on the Lethal Weapon franchise. He did a movie called Assassins, which is not that great, but Antonio Banderas and Sylvester Stallone, that kind of stuff. So Richard Donner is the director, and this is probably like the most like kid friendly movie he's ever done.
Didn't we see that Chris Columbus wrote it or co-wrote it, and he did a bunch of movies? Like, didn't he do a bunch of the Harry Potter movies?
He directed like 3 of the Harry Potter movies and stuff. So I mean, it definitely has like a kid's feel to it, especially with the whole, like, Steven Spielberg has this whole kind of childhood adventure kind of thing, like E.T., that kind of stuff. He's got that in his pocket too. So anyway, Sean Astin plays Mikey. Brandon Walsh is played by
Baby Thanos.
Josh Brolin, who I believe, this came out in 85. Thrashin' came out in 86. So, but I swear he looks like 5 years younger.
Yeah, Thrashin' must have been filmed in like 82 or something.
No, it was probably filmed 83. Maybe about the same time, maybe the year before, and then probably didn't get released until this movie came out because people are like, oh, Josh Brolin.
Yeah.
Of the other Goonies, we've mentioned Data. There's Chunk, played by Jeff Cohen, who is basically the fat kid. Yeah. That is like the comic relief. He's a perpetual liar and tells stories that none of them believe, like Michael Jackson coming to his house and using his bathroom, and all of his friends kind of call him out on it. And Corey Feldman, who makes his first appearance on the podcast tonight. His second appearance altogether,
because he was in Lost Boys.
But we'll be revisiting Corey Feldman in Stand By Me. But in this movie, he plays a character called Mouth because he's a
total
talker.
asshole.
And he's a talker. Oh, come on, he's got problems.
Yeah,
but.
And then Martha Plimpton.
Martha Plimpton plays Steph. Now,
the better female character.
So you've got like the 4 main Goonies of Chunk, Data, Mikey, and Mouth, and then his brother, who is about 16, Brandon. There's a girl that he is dating, going on dates with, named Andy, who you probably can't hear this because you're listening to this, but Nancy's eyes just rolled so hard in her eyes because she has things to say about Andy. And her best friend Steph, played by Martha Plimpton. They're getting ready to move. Everyone's kind of depressed. They're all hanging out at Mikey's house, and they're packing up stuff, and they find in the attic of Mikey's house a treasure map that is an artifact from the town museum, discovered and left behind by the pirate One-Eyed Willie. One-Eyed Willie. We hear that name about 150 times in this movie. So the other night, Nancy and I rewatched this together. This is one of the few movies that we've rewatched together. For the podcast. Every time One-Eyed Willie was said, Nancy giggled. Yeah, because she giggled. Funny. It's funny. Why is it funny? I don't understand. He had one eye. Lots of pirates only have one eye. Why is One-Eyed Willie funny? If I have to explain it to you, then it's not going to be funny. Well, I don't understand. Is it embarrassing? Yes. Okay. Maybe we won't talk about One-Eyed Willie. One-Eyed Willie. Oh my God. I think it's also funny because as a grown-up, you know why it's funny, but as a kid, you maybe don't get the innuendo. I'm still not understanding. Can you explain it to Mulder here? He watched it with us. He knows what it's about. Okay. So they discover this treasure map and then have this idea, hey, if we follow this treasure map and get the treasure that One-Eyed Willie has left behind... maybe they can save their house. They can all live. They don't have to leave the Goondocks. Yeah. So they have this grand plan, but there are boomerangs thrown into this. There are things that are going to create complications.
a whole set of characters you completely forgot to mention.
I am not forgetting to mention this.
Okay.
So
the Fratellis.
They have to go and they start their journey and, to find their way to One-Eyed Willie and his ship, the Inferno. And in order to get there, they have to go through the secret hideout of the Fratelli family gang. And it is underneath a restaurant. And of course,
serves brown water.
And in order to get to the beginning of their journey, they have to somehow make their way through the Fratellis. Now, there's Mama Fratelli and her 3 boys, one of which is continuing his villainous typecasting, Joe Pantoliano.
Evil Joe Pantoliano.
He's not evil. He's just, he wants to make movies. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do? And another actor who actually is, in the movie sings, opera.
Yeah,
and apparently
very bizarre.
that was written into the script because he could sing opera. But Robert Davey is his name.
He's done weird political voiceovers for conservative candidates.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, it's very bizarre.
That was a sarcastic wonderful.
I know.
And Anne Ramsey plays Mama Fratelli, who other people might know from Throw Mama from the Train.
Okay, that's what I thought.
The other movie
that's what I thought she was in.
She's pretty known for.
Not that I've seen that, though.
But then there's the third son, known only as Sloth, who is kind of a super, like you want to just feel for this guy because it's just sad.
He reminds me of characters from that X-Files episode Home.
Yes, but you
actually feel so bad for him.
Yeah, he has been he's disfigured in his face. He's not, he can't really talk very well. He's not very smart, but he's super strong, and they keep him chained to a wall in the basement of the restaurant. So the Fratellis, they're real winners. They're the family that you really want to be a part of. And the movie actually opens with them breaking out.
Italian singer
Jake, Robert Davies' character, out of prison. So at first they have to get through the Fratellis, and then once they do, they begin their journey through caves, through booby traps. Booty traps?
That's what I said. Booby traps. That's what I said.
Booby traps. And they kind of, while they're having this journey, kind of have some moments where they're kind of finding themselves, helping each other, showing what true friendship is about by helping each other. It's also about teasing each other, which is not what 12-year-old boys do, which is not the greatest thing, but, they're kids. What do you do? We'll talk about that a little bit in Stand By Me.
Oh, yeah.
But they go on this adventure, and, one of the things that also these two movies have in common is they really talk like kids because
they swear a lot.
And when parents aren't around, that's what kids do. Yeah. So, it was definitely, they got the language down on this. There's some real kind of cheesy moments in
the wishing well
movie.
Scene. I swear to God, I remembered that scene once it happened. I said, "Oh God, we're gonna get you can't take these. These are someone else's dreams. These are someone else's wishes." And I'm like,
Nancy was about to throw up when we were watching that scene.
There's definitely some ultra cheesy moments in this movie.
Yeah.
And that is probably top of the list.
Well, and I think that you have to remember, they wanted to make this movie in a sense, it was for people who of that age.
Oh yeah, it's for kids. So it's not for grown-ups. It's for kids.
I think that there's a lot of different things that jumped out of this movie. sitting there like, this is why I like this movie growing up, and probably why a lot of people the same age and people still like this movie. Like, I love all the like Rube Goldberg machines for the booby traps and stuff.
Those are all wonderful.
And the way that they kind of set that up is great, because there's all these booby traps that are throughout these caves that they run into, where it's like, oh, don't trip on this wire, and this giant thing will fall on you, or you have to play the organ of bones, which is really amazing looking.
Yeah.
And you have to play that, or the floor. It either opens a door if you do it right, and if you play the song wrong, the floor drops out and you land on spikes. But they really set that up really well at the beginning of the movie, when they're going to let Chunk into the house, and in order to open the door, there's a Rube Goldberg machine that opens the gate.
It's great. It's so good at the beginning. Yeah. And basically all of the stuff that Steven Spielberg borrows from Raiders of the Lost Ark are some of the best parts of this movie. Like all the stuff in the caves.
And then just the look. It has a look that is very similar, like that, and with like the music and everything, you would identify this as a production, like coming out of his production company at this point. That's one of the things I really liked about it. I thought that the kind of relationship that the kids have, the Goonies have, is pretty realistic as far as a friendship goes. And having those kinds of wanting to go on those kinds of adventures. And I think that, not every kid that's 12 has that opportunity, but I mean, any kid who still has an imagination right before they decide that they have to lose their imagination and become a teenager. I think that it kind of plays on that, which is a lot of fun. Yeah.
I think they picked a good location for this, meaning that, they live kind of, in a coastal woodsy town. The ocean's right there, so it kind of lends itself to a lot of adventure that, had it been set like in a city, if it had been set in like a real big urban area, you couldn't really picture these kids being able to wander off and do this kind of thing.
They would, but it would probably be like a Saw movie. It'd be like a horror movie if that were to happen. And
they ride their bikes a lot.
They ride their bike. I mean, they really act like kids. And they laugh at the same kinds of things, and they poke fun at each other and stuff like that. And
you say One-Eyed Willie a lot.
One-Eyed Willie. I think I'm gonna train Mulder to meow One-Eyed Willie, just so when you come over.
See, the One-Eyed Willie stuff too. I mean, it starts very early on, because when they're all meeting up at Mike's house, and, Chunk is an incredible klutz. He's a very klutzy kid from the moment we meet him. And he accidentally knocks over Mike's mom's favorite statue.
It's like a
statue of David.
It's like a miniature statue of David.
And of course, when it falls off the coffee table, the wiener gets knocked off. And, hence the whole beginning of One-Eyed Willie stuff.
And then he glues it on upside down.
And then oh my God, it's her favorite part.
And then Brandon's like, man, if God made you like that, you'd all be pissing in your faces.
So, I mean, dick jokes are obviously very 12-year-old.
Or the scene after the wishing well scene, when they have to go to the bathroom, and Mikey's like, okay, that cave will be the little girl's room, and this cave will be the little boy's room. And Brandon's like, starts walking off into this other direction, and he's like, Brandon, where are you going? He's like, I'm going to the men's room.
That was very funny.
And
but of course, this is a lighthearted kids movie for Steven Spielberg, so it has a happy ending.
Yeah, I mean, so eventually, I won't tell you what happens, but they save the Goondocks, and they all get to stay where they're at, and the Fratellis, don't get them.
Yeah,
I'll leave it at that.
They continue to be a menace for.
Yeah, I'm glad that I rewatched this movie.
Me too,
because I still think that it's a little dated, but I don't think it's that dated. I think the main thing that is dated about it is 12-year-olds these days would have cell phones. I think that's probably the only thing that kind of dates it. But I mean, depending on where you live, maybe not, and kids could still. It's almost a believable adventure.
Yeah.
And, as fantastical as it is, it's still kind of a believable adventure.
Yeah, the thing that's most dated for me is just or the thing that doesn't age well for me is just the cheesiness of it. Like, the cheesiness of the movie didn't bother me when we were kids, but watching it now, because I haven't seen it in 20 years at least, it definitely was kind of like, okay. And Andy, she drove me crazy.
What drove you? So if we weren't picking favorite characters, you're picking least favorite character?
She's not my least favorite character, but again, this is another movie we're picking where women don't have a huge role in these movies. You know, there's basically 2 women, if we don't count Mama Fratelli, because she's just kind of an evil character.
What about Rosalita?
See, she just didn't have that large of a role. And the mom, you know, I mean, the adults, let's just say of the kids, of the main characters, the protagonists, the kids, you know, there's 2 women to pick from. And watching it now, I mean, Steph totally outshines Andy in terms of how she talks, how bright she is. Like, Andy was just, other than her being the one that could play the bones, she was just this kind of whiny, neurotic, I don't know, and, you know, very, very surfacey. You know, it's like she was a cheerleader, so one of those kind of getting by with her looks kind of thing, not with her brain. And
well, there's kind of
not a feminist, a feminist at all.
I'm not. I totally agree with everything that you're saying. One thing that I would say is this movie really also kind of plays out like there's actual footage of it where Sloth is watching a movie of Errol Flynn in like a pirate kind of movie, and it really kind of harks back to some like old kind of like adventure movies, like a Sinbad or something like that. And there's always kind of a femme fatale kind of, or no, damsel in distress, not femme fatale, damsel in distress. And she definitely kind of fills the damsel in distress role. Granted, she's on the adventure with them, but it's like, oh my God, what are we going to do?
She's like shrieks, you know, she has almost like a mental breakdown. And it just seemed like even though Steph, whose glasses were crushed and she could barely see anything, she seemed to be holding it together a lot better. Yeah. And Andy is also, you know, really driven by her hormones. So, you know, she's got one guy who's this total jerk. Troy. What, you know, if you're
he's part of the country club crowd.
Exactly. You know, he's after her, and then you've got Brandon after her. So she's definitely leading with her sexuality and not what I think is a positive way, but as a, you know, it just... So she definitely was not, and I probably liked her more when I was a kid because I thought, oh, cool, she's
on the trip.
She's on the trip with these guys or whatever. But
I think that one of the other things that I really loved about this movie growing up, because of just my like creativity and wanting to like build things, is I loved Data and all of his gadgets.
His gadgets were awesome.
Data is like Data at one point, like when you first meet him, decides to like swoop in on like a wire on a zip line, and he puts in a tape that just says 007 on it, and he's playing the James Bond theme as he does this. And he wears a trench coat, and he's got this backpack, and he's got all these gadgets, right? And he's like Q. He's got like in James Bond, he's got like all these different little things that if they don't have Data on this trip, they're dead. Yeah, they're going to. He saves them in so many ways.
I mean, he had his pinchers of power. He had his slick shoes. What were some other ones that they used?
The boxing glove on that's shot out from his jacket and
beat up the Fratelli man.
The Fratelli guy. And, hey guys, I got a great idea. Slick shoes. That one's great. Oh, and then just having the blinder lights. Yeah. And so he just has like all these kind of neat things. So like as a kid, it was like if I was ever playing like Spy or something like that, or you know, there's all these MacGyver, you know, kind of gadgets kind of thing, then you could always look at him like, oh man, that was so cool that he had these things. Yeah. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. You know, it's funny, it's like, I probably was a pirate. I think I was a pirate once when I was a kid for Halloween, but I never really I've never really super been into pirates. So I never got that pirate influence from this movie. Yeah. Like I never wanted to be One-Eyed Willie. or go on a One-Eyed Willie adventure, or search for One-Eyed Willie.
Stop it. Oh my god, I'm so predictable. He's just making me do this. Well, here's the thing.
I mean, were you ever a pirate for Halloween?
I think so, at least once.
But I don't think any of us were like, pirates are amazing because of Goonies. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people were.
Well, I'll give you a reason why I can understand that. We never see any pirates alive. It's not like we see them doing stuff. There's
no swashbuckling in this
we
movie.
don't see what we just see all these skeletons of all these dead pirates around.
Yeah.
So we're not seeing them in action. We're not seeing them with sword fights.
You're not even seeing, like, other than like the broken down ship, you're also not even seeing like the traditional kind of pirate garb or anything like that. Other than like the only thing that you think about with pirates in this movie is like skulls and bones. That's it.
Yeah.
And booby traps and One-Eyed Willie.
Yeah, I mean, well, yes, they're searching for pirate treasure, and they talk about pirates all the time. Yeah, you don't, because it isn't a movie necessarily about pirates. It's about their treasure. This is a movie about kids. It's a movie about little adventurers that are, not afraid. They're very brave. They're very, bold, and they're quick on their feet. And like they say when they meet, I think it's when they pass where Chester Copperpot's skeleton is. Mm-hmm. Once they dig up his wallet because he'd been crushed by one of the booby traps, they stop and say, they're like, whoa, he was like an adult and he was a professional.
And we've gotten farther than him.
Yeah, like how are we this much further than that guy?
They actually had that conversation in the wishing well scene when they were trying to talk about their dreams.
Oh God.
See, you got that wrong because you had totally turned off that scene because you wanted to just not watch that scene ever again. It just made you.
It's so goofy.
It is kind of goofy.
Yeah.
But, it's an important scene because at that point, like, you've got Andy and Steph and Brandon who are not, like, part of their group. And after that scene, they're like, they kind of become part of the group.
The full initiation happened because that was their opportunity to go back up with Troy and leave the 4 kids alone, or actually it was only 3 kids, right? Chunk wasn't there.
Oh, that's right. Chunk doesn't go on the adventure with them because
he's being held hostage. He's being held
hostage by the Fratellis, and then later freed by the great character Sloth. Now, there is a fun thing about Sloth, other than the fact that he is actually just kind of a sweetheart, and he really just wants to have friends.
Wants to be loved.
He wants to be loved. At one point, the Fratellis kind of capture the group, and Chunk and Sloth come to their aid and save them. Mm-hmm. And when Sloth makes his appearance in front of his brothers and his mom, he rips off his shirt to show that he has a Superman shirt on, and then it plays the Superman theme briefully, and that is a total like Richard Donner nod. Like, awesome. I made this movie, and I made Superman, so it's kind of fun.
That was awesome, and I think he had a little pirate hat on.
Yeah, pirate hat.
It was great.
Sloth really should be like the hero. He's the hero of this movie in a lot of ways, and good for Sloth. Played by an actor who didn't do a lot, but he was an Oakland Raider.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was a former football player turned actor.
Interesting.
So, yeah, there you go.
You want to talk about favorite characters?
It's really hard for me to pick my favorite character on this because, like, when I was a kid, it probably would have been Data. Mm-hmm. And as an adult, I think it's still Data. Cool. Only because I think I like all of his gadgets, and he's into the adventure, and he never really, like, there's times where he's cool, and then there's times where he's kind of scared, like a kid should be.
He's never annoying.
But he's never annoying, exactly. Yeah. He's always trying to help out. He's always trying to, like, I mean, and again, he saves their lives numerous times. Brandon is just kind of self-centered. Mm-hmm.
And he didn't pass his driver's test.
And he picks on Mikey and the other Goonies all the time. And he stole a little girl's bike.
Yeah.
I mean, not the best character to like. I agree with you about Andy. Steph, not a huge character. Mouth has some funny lines.
He's basically Eddie Haskell, but with a dirty mouth.
Yeah, but they can't. But again, they can't go on their adventure without him because the map is written in Spanish. And he knows how to speak Spanish.
All right.
And Chunk is. I like Chunk. I think he's funny. He's definitely like. He's definitely the kid who is very realistic, who like wants to be loved and have friends, and he just thinks he has to say things to like get people to like him, but he just does it in the dumbest way. But he's 12, so I mean, I kind of like laugh at him, and I just think he's just trying so hard.
So Data.
So I'm thinking Data and Mikey, Sean Astin. You know, it's so funny because looks so young in this movie that I don't even recognize him as like anything he's ever done in anything else. Mm-hmm. You know, he just looks so different. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he's the one pushing the adventure and everything like that. But, you know, I guess
he's got a whininess to him, too.
Yeah, and there's just nothing kind of cool about him. I don't know.
He's got asthma, so he's got to deal with that all the time.
I mean, he's a great... I mean, they don't go on this adventure without him. I mean, he really pushes them to do this. It's his whole idea.
They all have their role. They all have a function.
Right. And I guess I just think, like, Data's cool. So
yeah, that's good.
Data, none of the Fratellis. None of them.
Chunk's my favorite character.
Great.
And I don't think I would have thought he was my favorite character when we were kids. Because I think I would have done a lot of eye rolling as a kid, like, oh my god, he's such a klutz, oh my god, he's so silly, he's just, you know, he tries so hard. But watching it as an adult, Chunk's my favorite character.
I love one of
my favorite scene is a Chunk scene.
Is it the torture scene?
It's the blender interrogation scene.
That is so
where
great.
He reveals every bad deed he's ever done his whole life.
That's not that wasn't what they asked him.
It wasn't, but that's how he interpreted it.
We want you to tell us everything.
Everything?
Everything.
And oh my god, that scene had me dying. It was so, I loved it. That scene cracked me up. And
that's a great scene.
And not just him in that scene where he's just crying and just because they're evil, like
they're about to turn his hand into hamburger meat.
Exactly. But the expressions on the three of their faces listening to this kid reveal every horrible thing he's ever done, and they don't say anything. They can't, because they're just so stunned by all this like long confessional that this kid has.
Well,
I was dying.
Jake at one point even goes, "I'm starting to like this kid, Ma."
Exactly. I mean, it just was so. And of course, you know, his relationship with Sloth too was very kind and sweet, but. The torture scene, he won it. He won me over in that scene.
Yeah, that's
so funny.
I'm glad that you picked Chunk because he like I said, there's something just lovable about him, and I think that's a fun thing. So
what's your favorite scene?
So your favorite scene is the interrogation scene. My favorite scene. Well, obviously, it's the wishing well scene. No, I'm just kidding.
Is it when Andy makes out with Mikey instead of Brandon?
Yeah, and she thinks that he was standing in a hole because he's so much shorter. No.
He has braces? What?
No. I actually really like the scene when... I really like the interrogation scene. That scene's great. But I really like the scene when... Mikey discovers One-Eyed Willie and has this kind of conversation with him about I beat you, you know, I made it here kind of thing, and he kind of breaks down and has like this heartfelt kind of like kind of coming of age kind of experience in this scene, and I don't know, I just kind of like it, and
how he was wise enough to leave that one tray left, which was then another booty trap.
Well, You know what? Was it a booby trap? Because ultimately it freed the ship. That doing that freed the ship.
Well, was the ship supposed to be freed?
Does it matter?
Well, either way, clearly clearly they set it up so that it makes it look smart that you leave that behind.
Yeah.
Don't rob them of this.
Right.
Leave that behind because, yeah.
I totally also felt like the way this movie ends feels like they're supposed to be like they were gonna probably make another one, and they never did.
I don't know. I think it was a complete story.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know how kind of like something that this movie totally influenced is like Stranger Things.
Well, yeah, and duh. I mean, Stranger Things in season 2, you've got Sean Astin, and he does a lot of nods to this movie. I think there's even scenes about treasure maps.
Right. So
in Stranger Things.
So,
Bob.
You know, it would have been cool to kind of see like something else, but I think where you lose it is like whenever there's something with teenagers, you always run into this problem of actors get older and kids get older. It's like that's why like whenever you had like a sitcom with teenage kids, it was like once they graduated high school, what did you do? You know, did you see them go off to college just because you wanted to make more seasons of a show, or did you end the show? You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, not that this is a Stranger Things podcast, but from what I understand, like they had a lot of challenges with some of the young actors filming season 3 because
they're all growing, and one of them in particular is like 8 feet tall.
Finn Wolfhard grew like 8 inches between season 2 and season 3, so they literally had to film it differently to make it look more normal. I mean, it was so bizarre watching that, but the way that I could totally see, like, especially with like the whole like so many movies that we grew up with like got sequels that some were good, some were terrible. I could see like them wanting to make more of these movies, but I'm really glad they didn't.
Me too.
I mean, of course, you know, I'm sure The Rock will somehow get involved in trying to revamp this.
Yeah. He's going to want to do a sequel. You know, he'll want to do a remake.
No, actually, I don't know how old his kids are, but when his kids get old enough, they will redo it, you know? And, you know, it was definitely, I just think that it was, for our age group, it was a fun coming of age adventure story.
Oh yeah.
You know, and there's a lot, and it really kind of influenced a lot of other coming of age, young adventure stories.
How many kids, when they saw this movie, probably like wanted to raid their attics and see if there was any
treasure map,
or
made fake treasure maps to find a treasure from underneath their porch.
Yeah, exactly. I also just want to give a quick shout out to Cyndi Lauper and her music in the movie. I thought it was charming, and I think it still ages well. I like it.
Cyndi Lauper's an excellent.
Classic.
She's an excellent artist.
Timeless. So
with what I think she does eczema commercials, like she has eczema or something like that.
She's going to be in a Golden Girls remake that they're doing.
What?
She and Jane Lynch have signed up with Netflix to do a Golden Girls like kind of series. Yep, it's gonna be awesome.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
The other 2 ladies still to be cast.
I thought that's what that Hot in Cleveland show was. Wasn't there was a show called Hot in Cleveland with a bunch of young. Betty White was in that. Maybe that's why I'm tying it to Hot in Cleveland.
Exactly.
Betty White was in that. So
we're going to move on to another movie about 12-year-olds. Another movie about an adventure, but an incredibly different tone. Everything about Stand By Me is very different than Goonies.
Well, again, similarities. Age, similar. There's bad guys kind of going after the same treasure or goal. There is a map in it. Well, we don't see the map because the map gets thrown away by one of the characters' moms.
Oh, yeah.
But there's a map.
Yeah.
And, again, Corey Feldman is, is one of the group of four.
Yep. So, Stand By Me came out in 86, so a year after Goonies. Like Matt said, Corey Feldman is in it. He plays Teddy. Will Wheaton plays Gordy. Jerry O'Connell, unrecognizable because he's so freaking hot now, plays Vern. And River Phoenix plays Chris Chambers. Kiefer Sutherland plays a bad guy. And there's a lot of other adults that are just pretty much mean or useless or villainous. And
I wouldn't say that about all the adults in this.
a lot of them.
I think it's just how certain things are interpreted.
Okay, well, that's
like of the adults we see, the meanest is like the junkyard guy.
Will Wheaton's dad's not very nice either.
He's not very nice, but
he's grieving the death.
He's grieving the death
of John Cusack.
Yes. But even before that, he was kind of rude.
Yeah, he was.
But
he was
not as bad as the junkyard guy.
No, the junkyard guy was definitely.
And even though we don't see him, Teddy's dad was pretty bad.
Teddy's dad's bad. Chris's dad is bad. Vern's parents don't sound like real great people. So the premise of this movie is that it's Labor Day, 1959.
Labor Day weekend. They're about to go back to school.
And they finished grammar school, so they're all going to be going to middle school. So they already know that their dynamic is going to be different because this town is really small. It's Castle Rock, Oregon. So this is our second movie this week, also in Oregon. They just know that while they, acknowledge it openly or not, this is kind of the last moment that their friendships will be like this. Like this, they kind of want to freeze this moment in time and know that because when they go back to school, because of the way middle school is, they're not going to be in the same classes most likely. It'll be harder to stay as connected as they were when they were growing up together in elementary school. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, and I'm sure I know you're going to mention this. This movie is based on a short story by Stephen King,
The Body,
called The Body, which that's probably the most Stephen King-y as it kind of gets as far as he's so known for horror, but just the idea of what their adventure is going on and it being called The Body. But almost a majority of his stories, or a lot of his stories, take place in Maine, and this takes place in Oregon. Yeah,
so that was definitely a departure for what he normally does. And the main characters are kids. I don't know how many of his stories feature kids as the main characters. Yeah,
that's definitely
Carrie. I don't know. I guess there's a handful, but really, I mean,
he's written so many things, and a lot have been turned into movies or television series that some people know. I mean, The Shining. There's a kid in that. I mean, there's definitely a child, he uses kids a lot, just like, I mean, as much as he uses adults, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
One other actor in this movie, Richard Dreyfuss, he's grown up Gordy, and he's the narrator for the story. So Vern is under his porch because he has lost the treasure map that he drew to find a quart jar of pennies. And he overhears his brother and his brother's friend talking about how they found this dead body of the kid. So the big adventure that the kids are going to go on is looking for the body of Ray Brower, another 12-year-old kid from their town. And again, this is a really small town. I think it was like 1,200 people or something. So everybody knows everybody. And they're trying to figure out, okay, what story do we tell to our parents? Oh, we're all going to go to a sleepover at Vern's house. Oh, Vern, you're going to sleep over at Teddy's house. Next day, we're going to go to the drag races. That gets us in the clear for 2 full days to be gone, to go on this 20-plus mile walk. Maybe 30, along the railroad tracks to this spot on like the back of Harlow Road or something to see where did Ray's body get found? And
if they find the body, they could be heroes and maybe get an award and we could be on TV, that kind of thing. And things that 12-year-olds care about.
Sure. but I mean, I think there was also, they all were curious for sure about like, how did a kid die? How did this kid die?
Or
Was he killed, or what happened? So, so the movie, this movie being our, also I want to point out, third Rob Reiner movie we're talking about, which I think is great. It goes over, it takes place over just the course of these few days, or these two days really. And it's established pretty early, what these four kids are like. Teddy is this wild kid. He has a dad who we later find out is in like a psychiatric unit somewhere. He's in a nut house because he went crazy one day, and probably one of the many beatings that Teddy suffered as a kid, he took Teddy's face and ear and put it to a stove and nearly killed him. Yet Teddy has this, he's incredibly defensive of his dad. And throughout the movie, he'll talk about how his dad stormed the beach at Normandy. And, I'm not really sure if I believe it.
Well,
or if it was just an exaggeration, but this is the story that he grew up hearing about his father and kind of making his father this larger than life person.
The movie takes place in 1959.
And the kids are 12, so he would have been born in 47.
So it is possible that his father was in the war and could, maybe he had PTSD. Maybe something happened to him. Maybe he didn't. Yeah. Maybe he didn't. Have the glory of being an American soldier in World War II, or maybe something happened to him, and maybe that made him nuts, or maybe he made all that shit up. We don't really know. All we know is that Teddy has.
He's idolized.
He's idolized his dad, but his dad's not in the picture.
Yeah.
And Teddy wears camo gear, has a military canteen, always talks about, makes comments, or sound effects like he's in the middle of a battle kind of thing. And his whole life is a battle, really.
Yeah.
And so, Corey Feldman actually, all four of the boys, there's something great about all their characters, and we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So Teddy kind of has this really wild streak, this kind of rage under the surface. He's a really hard to handle kind of guy. Vern is the ultra cautious, very deep, intense worrier, afraid of his parents, afraid of his brother, just doesn't want to break the rules. It's just, this. I feel so much for Vern.
He's also, again, like Chunk, the fat kid who always gets teased and made fun of.
Yeah. Too bad he didn't have a crystal ball to know what he's going to look like when he grew up. Anyways, Gordy is very creative. He's a storyteller. He becomes a writer when he grows up, but he's also dealing with great family tragedy. 4 months earlier, his brother had died in a car accident, and he says, I'm an invisible boy in my family. His parents just cannot deal with this. They don't acknowledge that he's even alive anymore because the older brother is gone. So he deals with this trauma all the time. And it's very sad. I mean, it's so sad to watch him.
Even before his brother died, though, his brother was seen as the king of the high school, so much potential. His
football
dad,
superstar,
a superstar in the making, and his dad just had him on this super high pedestal, and Gordy was just ignored by his dad and his brother, played by John Cusack.
He loved
Denny.
him.
He loved him. He gave him a hat, and there's a few moments there's only the couple scenes with John Cusack in it, where he plays Dennis, where he and Gordy have these really great moments that really shape the character.
Yeah, those are some of the best moments of the movie. And then you have Chris Chambers, who's River Phoenix, who he's so good. I forgot what an incredible actor he is.
I've never forgotten how incredible an actor he is.
I haven't seen any of his movies in a long time, but just to watch him in this movie, he's kind of, as Gordy describes it, the leader of their gang. And his father's a raging alcoholic, beats him all the time. He's a troubled kid. He gets in trouble. He's got a pack of cigarettes rolled up in his sleeve. And, he really he's the tough kid in the group. But also really bright and very articulate, and also kind of a fill-in bigger brother for Gordy now that Dennis is gone.
One thing that, and this isn't really a spoiler because you find this out at the very beginning of the movie. Gordy is a writer, and he's narrating the story, and he's basically writing the story about this whole event, that this adventure that they happen. And what inspires him to write this is at the very beginning of the movie, he's sitting in a car and he looks at a newspaper article and he sees that Chris has been murdered.
Yeah, he was killed in breaking up a fight at a fast food restaurant. He was stabbed.
So that inspires him to kind of write this story. That's the kind of guy, here you learn throughout the movie about Chris Chambers and the troubles he has and the things that the way he kind of talks to Gordy is, he's really, like you said, he's trying to fill in for where, he lost a brother, and he's trying to be, that brother figure that he doesn't have.
He even says at one point, I wish I was your dad because I would value, well, he doesn't use the word value, but I would value you. I would see you. I would be able to love you the way that your dad is too blind to.
Right. So
the way that these long adventures go, and 12-year-old boys, like none of them packed any food. They kind of didn't have a complicated, checklist before their trip. So they traveled very light. Luckily they were able to scrounge up enough money to go to the local grocer and pick up a few things so they could actually eat a little bit on the trip. But the trip, they got to, I think Vern brought a little radio, so we get to hear a lot of great music from the late 50s. Matt and I grew up listening to oldies all the time, but this movie is a really great, solid soundtrack of songs from the 50s, starting with like Buddy Holly and, of course, Stand By Me by Benny King. And I didn't notice this until watching it today, but there's like a musical score that repeats Stand By Me throughout the whole movie, which is really sweet. These kids, they're off on the adventure and, things happen, problems come up. There's a chase with a dog, which the
Chopper. Sick balls.
and the junkyard owner, confronts all the kids. And again, cause this is such a small town, he's like, I know all of you and I'm going to go, all your dads are going to get phone calls from me tonight. Oh yeah, except you, Teddy, because your dad's in the loony bin. He causes a lot of problems for the kids. Kiefer Sutherland, super big villain in this. Less evil,
Major dick.
maybe less evil than his role in Lost Boys. For different reasons.
I don't know, man. He's pretty messed up in this movie.
No, he's maybe more like David is probably less evil in some ways than Ace.
Okay, David is cool.
Yeah.
Ace.
Yeah, David was our
dick.
favorite character. We loved David.
Ace is a dick.
Ace is awful. Ace rips Denny's Yankees cap off his head right after we'd seen
of Gordy's head.
Off of Gordy's head, right when we'd seen the flashback where Gordy gives him this. You just want to punch Ace in the face.
I think, and then there's to give you an idea of what Ace is like he's the leader of the older gang, the Cobras.
Oh God.
And he's just. He's like the ultimate rebel, he bullies his own gang members.
Yeah, he's just so evil.
He's just such a dick. And, and there's rumors that he's had sex with his own mom and weird shit. And it's just he's horrible. There's if this was the first movie you saw Kiefer Sutherland in, which probably for us it was, it's hard to not see him as kind of a villain going forward. And we mentioned that in Lost Boys, he always kind of seems like he should be a villain or something.
Yeah. Ace and his gang of jerks, they cause a lot of problems for the four boys while they're out.
Well, and the number 2 in the gang is Chris's brother, Eyeball. And they're all just pricks. They're much pricks.
So, the kids are kind of trudging along. They're doing their long 20-ish mile walk, and they're following the train tracks. And you have a scene where it becomes, is a train going to come, and can they beat it? That's an intense scene. But I think one of the strongest things about this movie is there are a lot of like deep conversations that these 12-year-olds have. And I'm not talking about the fire, around the fire when they're debating the Disney characters and what is Goofy a dog or not. I'm talking about
what the hell is Goofy?
I know. I think like my, and this is kind of jumping to what's my favorite scene, but it's more just a series of scenes. My favorite scenes are these intense one-on-one talks that Chris and Gordy have, whether it's when Chris is standing guard at night because they heard coyotes, and he's talking about how unfair it is that everyone just always assumes he's this horrible person and he's going to always do these bad things. Is he ever going to be able to get out of this town and create a new life for himself?
Well, and he talks about how he wants to get out because he wants to go somewhere where no one knows who he is.
He can start over.
He can start over. Yeah.
Those moments, or when Gordy talks about his brother's death and he didn't cry at the funeral, but oh my God, I miss him so much. And, just those intense conversations that the two of them have. I mean, not only does it showcase what an incredible actor River Phoenix was, but it feels so authentic. Like, I don't know if 12-year-old boys would really talk like this or not, but the emotion that is, I mean, that's why this movie is so much like an adult movie. The movie's a rated R movie. It was not a kid's movie.
No.
And I don't know. I just think the themes are so grown up, even though it's 12-year-olds that are the leads.
Honestly, I don't remember having friends that I would have conversations like that with when I was 12. I had friends when I was 12, but I don't, and I had friends that I would probably go on like little adventures with, but I don't remember having like those heart to heart kind of conversations. And maybe it's, and it could just be my personality or, just how I was when I was 12, but I don't remember, like, granted, I also don't remember either I was insensitive and didn't give a shit, or
you've never been that way.
Well, maybe I just never knew of people having such a hard time as these kids had.
That was what I was going to say. I think you and I were actually both very fortunate to never really know. We didn't have any peers that had these kinds of horrible lives.
Well, but
no close friends, at least, that we ever would have really known about.
And if they did, I apologize. Like, not caring that much. I there's times like watching this movie, I started having like this kind of like thought, like, I don't remember any of the friends that I had having home lives like Teddy had. But also, was I just kind of like living in my bubble and not like noticing, or not like or were they hiding it that well, or did they not want to talk about it? I mean, that's the other thing. Like, we didn't live in a small town. When you live in a small town,
it's
news
harder
gets around, everyone kind of knows things, you hear rumors, and there's kind of like this whole like small town gossipy kind of thing that happens. Maybe it's more important for kids that age to have relationships like that, because of the the things that they were going through.
I will also point out, this is where I feel like this movie is such a perfect period piece, in the sense that the elements that they highlight for that period don't necessarily carry on much past this slice of time. They're all 12. They all smoke. And maybe being a kid in 1959 meant you really had the fear of God of your, you really feared your parents so much because you were beaten all the time. Like, was that pretty common back then? I mean, it seems like parenting has radically changed from decade to decade. And, I mean, the idea that in the 50s, you need to fear getting your butt beaten if you did something wrong. Yeah. Because it did actually happen. So them having that as a shared experience was really kind of no big deal, because that's what it was like for most kids growing up in the 50s.
Yeah.
So that, that was another kind of eye-opening thing watching this movie again, because we watched it when it came out in the mid 80s, and there was a lot of like nostalgia movies done in the mid 80s of the 50s and early 60s, and it's kind of the way things work. But to watch it now, 30 years later, the period piece element really stands out to me, and it doesn't feel dated. It just seems, wow, the smoking thing, of course, because I don't know.
You don't see it as much anymore.
I mean, you see kids vaping now, but that's a whole other. But yeah, 12-year-olds all smoking. Like they said, oh man, good smoke after a meal. Gotta love it. But the parents whipping the kids if they get out of line a little bit. Yeah. I mean, is that maybe kind of common back then? I don't know. Again, I mentioned it already, but soundtrack for this movie is excellent. I mean, it really sets the tone for the whole movie. Yeah. It's really great. It helps pace the movie a lot, too, because they're kind of just on a walking journey through a lot of this movie, So the music really kind of helps keep the movie moving forward. I don't know. You want to jump to your favorite scene or favorite types of scenes?
One of the things that I was going to talk about earlier, and we were talking about this group of boys and the four of them, and you kind of went over some of their background, but there's something about like Corey Feldman. I was doing my research. I guess in one interview he said like, this character is like the closest character that he's ever played that is like who he is in real life. Wow.
That's interesting.
And
you mean he's not like a frog brother?
No.
He's not like Mouth?
No. But and I think that's the thing about like these kids is they're really sensitive and they're really smart. Mm-hmm. And they really kind of like throughout the whole movie they like goof on each other, and I mean, when we watched this as kids, like memorable scenes when we were kids was like the Barfarama scene.
Oh man, that scene is so great.
Or when they're all in the junkyard and they toss the coins to see who's going to get the food. Gordy loses, and they're like all ragging on him because he lost the thing, and he's like, hey, shut up. I don't shut up, I grow up, and when I look at you I throw up. Yeah. That kind of scenes like that are the memorable scenes. Watching this now, especially with a kid, I watched this movie in some ways with very different eyes. It really hit me in a lot of ways, like these kids really have been through a lot. I mean, even Gordy, who has like the most normal home life, doesn't have a normal home life because his brother was killed in a car accident. Yep. And his parents, even though they don't abuse him physically, they abuse him emotionally abused, like crazy.
He's neglected
because the scene. There's a scene where they're all sitting at the dinner table. And they're all talking about Denny and how scouts are going to be at the football game, blah, 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 blah. Denny goes, hey, did you read that story Gordy wrote? It was a really great story. And they just totally ignore him. Yeah. And he has to like whisper to him like, I read your story and I thought it was really great. Yeah. And ultimately that kind of encouragement is what he needed.
Denny's the only one that kind of validated Gordy at all.
Besides the guys. Yeah. Besides his group. Probably one of my favorite scenes in this movie, because this is a really great movie, but the scene that really stood out to me while doing my rewatch was there's a scene, and it's one of those moments between Chris and Gordy. They're walking on the tracks, and I think it's after the night that they're like on their way to
before the leeches.
I think it was before the leeches.
Okay.
And
which, let me point out, I don't think I ever really knew what leeches were until watching this movie, and
now you wish you didn't know.
Yeah,
but
have never wanted to fall into a body of water filled with leeches.
So they're talking about the two of them are talking about how things are going to be different when they go to school. And Gordy's like, it's not going to be different. And Chris is trying to explain to him, yes, it is. You're going to be in different classes because you're going to be in college prep classes. And me and Teddy and Vern are going to be in the dumb classes, basically. He doesn't say that. He doesn't use that term.
That's what he means, though.
You know, we're going to be in, making ashtrays and shit. And you're going to be, reading. He's like, I don't want to take any of those classes. And Chris is like, I don't ever want to hear you say that. You have a gift, and you need to use it because you're smart and you have been given brains, and we've been shit on, and you need to get out of here. And this scene is almost identical to the scene in Good Will Hunting when Ben Affleck has the same conversation with Matt Damon.
Yeah.
I'm going to be breaking bricks my whole life, and you've been given, a lottery ticket. You need to do this. And just seeing this scene and seeing how this friend, who's not his brother, who's not his parents, who's not a family member, encouraged him to really pursue something, I just thought that was a great scene.
It's wonderful.
And it really hit me at this point in my life, and seeing this happen, like, holy shit, man, this is a fucking kid who really, this is a real friend,
Yeah.
And I looked back at the friends I've had, and I've had friends like this, and I'm glad that they're illustrating this scene in this movie with kids this young of an age, because that's what I would want my son to see this scene and know, like, if you have friends that are like this, stay with those friends because they will help you get further in life.
Yeah.
And I just really thought it was great.
Yeah. I think any scene with River Phoenix and Will Wheaton, that is where this movie was just absolutely the strongest.
Yeah. I think it's pretty obvious. Is River Phoenix your favorite character? And Chris Camber's your favorite? He's
Yours
mine.
too.
Yeah.
He's such a strong character, and the range of emotion that we see, just everything he did was so great.
I read some interesting trivia during my research. One being that just to show like the great acting that is in this movie. Kiefer Sutherland, he's pretty young in this movie. Even offset, he bullied the four kids, the four boys.
Stayed in character, great.
Just basically to kind of, because he wanted to, like, keep that going. Like, so the kids would do stuff to him. Like, I guess at one point they covered his entire car in mud.
Oh.
As to kind of get back at him. But, they were all young too. River Phoenix was 15 when he made this movie. And I guess, and I don't know, anything you read on the internet is always questionable about how true it is, but we're on a podcast and it's fun to talk about. Apparently he went up to Rob Reiner and said, it finally happened. And Rob was like, what?
You have sex?
He lost his virginity in the making of this movie. So, there's... That's one of the neat things about this movie is it's also kids making a movie about kids. They were, they were a little older than they were portraying, but it's not like it's not like that 80s thing that I hate where you have 25-year-olds playing 16-year-olds, so that was, I think that River Phoenix hands down is like the standout of the group. Yeah. Not that, Jerry O'Connell has had a successful career. Sliders, that's a fun show. And I'm not kidding. It's kind of a fun show. You should check it out. Corey Feldman was in a ton of stuff. So he, it's definitely like you'd say, like, how successful was he? But, he had some personal problems that kind of changed his career. When
you open up IMDb to look at Corey Feldman, the three movies that come up that are his most popular are the three we've talked about that he's in: Lost Boys, Goonies, and Stand By Me. Like, those are what he's most known for.
Right. And then Will Wheaton went on to, like, right after this, he went on to be in Star Trek The Next Generation, the best Star Trek television show in my opinion. And he's had he has like he has like a podcast about board games, and I mean he's had a nice kind of career, you know, post Star Trek that, you know, he's not, I think he's been able to do what he wants.
Has he played himself on Big Bang a few times?
He plays himself on Big Bang Theory numerous times.
Okay, that's what I thought.
It starts out as he is Sheldon's mortal enemy because at one point he didn't sign a Will Wheaton action figure for Sheldon, so Sheldon hates him, and then eventually they become friends.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean my biggest knock on Will Wheaton is he's a huge Dodger fan, and it drives me crazy. I can't read your Twitter, Will Wheaton, because you tweet about the Dodgers too much. Yeah, I'm bitter. I'm a Giants fan. Sorry. But yeah, the River Phoenix just
he hits a home run with this movie.
He hits a home run with this movie. I don't know a movie of his that really isn't watchable.
Yeah.
I mean, like, even a movie like My Own Private Idaho, for me, it's not, there's something about it where it's like, it's interesting, but there's like a pace in it that makes it like harder to watch. Like, it's not a movie I would rewatch a million times.
Yeah, I think I've only seen it once or twice.
But
been a long time.
There's like a great movie called like The Mosquito Coast with Harrison Ford, and he that's great. I mean, so many of his movies are great, and he died when he was 23. His career, even though he had been in a lot of stuff in that short period of time, his career was just starting. I mean, it's just so sad, and to have an actor kind of standing out like he does in this movie, just to see what he was doing then, and then look at the breadth of his career. Yeah, gotta give it to River Phoenix.
Yeah, I'm looking at his IMDb, and there's definitely a handful of movies of his that I still haven't seen yet. A few we may eventually talk about on the show. I've always thought he was so great.
Mean, I'm gonna run down this because of the ones that I've seen.
Sneakers.
Stand By Me, great. Mosquito Coast, great.
Jack said Dogfight's really good.
Explorers, that is a fun movie.
Yeah. I don't remember if I've seen either Running on Empty or Little Nikita, but I feel like I've seen parts
Little
of
Nikita is like a spy movie.
Ooh.
It's pretty interesting where his parents are being investigated as Russian spies.
It would be like the Americans.
Running on Empty is great. It's him and
Judd Hirsch.
Judd Hirsch and his wife are wanted by the government because of things they did during the 60s, and they're kind of bringing their family along with it. I've never seen A Night in the Life of Jimmy Reardon. Obviously, he has a small part as young Indiana Jones in Indiana Jones' Last Crusade, which he's great in.
Does he fall in a pit of snakes?
Yes. Well, he falls in a train car full of snakes.
Yeah.
I haven't seen I Love You to Death. I haven't seen Dogfight. Sneakers, another kind of great movie, takes place in San Francisco, all about like technology and a huge, amazing cast in that movie. I have not seen Silent Tongue or A Thing Called Love, or I don't know what this other movie is about, Dark Blood, but it came out in 2012, so I have no idea what's going on there. But anyway, River Phoenix, can't say enough about him.
Agreed.
Wow.
Yeah, these movies again have incredibly different tones, but they both definitely showcase what being 12-year-old boys is like, and in different ways.
And
they're both coming of age movies,
and taking place 25 years apart, like one in 59 and one in the mid 80s. Mm-hmm. You know, in a lot of ways, there's that sense of adventure. You know, that the people who wrote these stories are trying to kind of convey. And
I think for me, Stand By Me has aged great. I mean, I was thrilled to rewatch this today, and I would watch this again and again, and it was so good.
Yeah,
I don't know when I need to watch Goonies again.
Goonies is fun. Like, I would watch Goonies when my son gets older.
Yeah.
And I think that would be fun.
When he's like, I bet when he's like 7, I think this would be a good movie for him.
Yeah, and maybe a little older than that, because
you don't want him running around saying "One-Eyed Willie" all the time.
I have no problem. In fact, I'll make sure he writes it in your cards. And then if I explain to him the joke, he'll just draw it.
Oh my god.
You know, he wasn't in it, but we can ask John Cusack what he thinks of Goonies. I mean, he didn't get a huge... You know, what's funny is I'm wondering, obviously, again, I don't read, so I'm curious if there's more scenes with Dennis in the book, the novella. Just so people know, like, The Body was a short story in a book that's a group of short stories that also has the Shawshank Redemption, which is not called the Shawshank Redemption. It's called, like, it has a different name with the word Shawshank in it, but if you're a reader, go ahead and you can read that, and then tell me whether there's more scenes with Dennis in it.
One last thing about Stand By Me, and again, just to give Rob Reiner some really great credit for doing this, because he did this with When Harry Met Sally also. He kept this movie tight. This movie is an hour and a half, and not that I don't like movies that are long, but I like a movie that gets in, gets out, tells a really great story and doesn't waste any time.
Yeah.
I mean, the pacing is great. It didn't need to be longer. I thought it was, I mean, yeah, I could have used more John Cusack. I wouldn't have been upset about that, but yeah, hour and a half, excellent.
Yeah.
I'm not against long movies. We're going to talk about long movies at some point, but they just very economic in their storytelling.
I'm indifferent. I have if the movie doesn't get slow, you know, I have no problem watching a 3-hour movie. You know, it has to. There's certain movies that, like, it's hard to rewatch a 3-hour movie.
Correct.
But it also depends. Again, it depends on the movie.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, Rob Reiner has a very good editor that keeps things
tight,
nice and tight.
Yeah, nice and tight. I want to thank everybody for listening. Don't forget to like us on Twitter and Facebook, follow our Instagram, and please tell your friends about us. You know, not that we're, you know, dying to have a lot more listeners, but, you know,
a few more would be great. I'd never shrug at more listeners. That'd be great. And, you know, please feel free to comment on our Instagram or Facebook pages. We love hearing from you guys. We love your feedback. You know, do you have a favorite River Phoenix movie? Did you like Goonies? Who was your favorite character? We'd love to hear any of this stuff.
Can you name another great Corey Feldman movie for us to watch? And
I think we've gone through the main three, so
the big three. I mean, I'm going to pass. Hard pass on License to Drive, or there's another movie where he plays like a resurrected Jason Robards. Dream a Little Dream. Yeah. Yes. I'm going to pass on those two.
Me too.
I'll pass on those. But if there's anything else, I think he did a television show, Dweebs, I think is what it was called. Anyway, and again, thank you guys for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. One-Eyed Willie.
Thank you guys.